raindrops coming down. Everyone here's been wondering, when will it be over? Highway night train, every evening. Maybe change is coming soon with the harvest moon. Take me down to the river, take me to the preacher man. I can't wait any longer, I messed up all I can. I hear the night train singing in the distance. Baby, the angels are coming soon with the harvest moon.
Hey, alright, yeah, hey, here we are with the 2-year anniversary of a monthly series I haven't even been able to keep up with. Now, I know this isn't being uploaded on the exact 2-year anniversary of this series, and I apologize for that, it was meant to be. But I mean, you know, I'm a college student, stuff happens, midterms are going on right now. It's been a very stressful few months, to say the least, and I'll have some updates and some questions for you guys at the end of this video if you stick around. But this being the 2-year anniversary, I figured I should at least add some kind of bookend to this series as a whole, but more on that later. So, with all of that being said,
Hello, Odyssey!
This is how I rate each movie. You can tell my immediate feelings on a movie based on the color of its number. We good? Let's go.
The Tomorrow War isn't even ironically enjoyable. Every element of this dumbass piece of shit is so overdramatic and nonsensical and stereotypical, it feels like a parody of cliché American bombastic action movies. Every plot point, every character, every emotional beat feels so unbelievably pathetic that I can't believe any of this was ever expected to be taken seriously. And it's not just overall uninteresting garbage. It's poorly paced, uninteresting garbage. Oh, and the music's overbearing. And the dialogue sucks. And there's nothing original about it in any way, shape, or form. To paraphrase one of my favorite IMDb reviews of this, it's amazing that they spent $200 million on this thing, yet still couldn't afford to hire a writer. For your own sake, please stay away from this product, because that's what it is, a product. And it's not even a good one at that. This movie may not be good, like, at all, but at least in the moment it's fun to laugh at. While this movie did have a couple standout sequences and characters, there's nothing unique about it whatsoever. I like the fact that there were zombie animals, that's not something you see too often in movies like this, and the idea of a zombie apocalypse being set in Las Vegas is certainly a lot of fun. It just never really does anything with that idea. The logic within the movie is inconsistent and sloppily presented, the cinematography is ugly and hard to look at for too long, and the writing is kinda boring and standard. It's really just a poor man's Aliens and I Am Legend. Like, seriously, beat for beat, that's how it feels, just the two put together into one. I don't know, watch this if you're a fan of Zack Snyder, I guess, and form your own opinion, but if you're not, just skip it. Nothing happens in this movie. I get that that's the whole draw of it, but if I'm being honest, it just wasn't enough for me. If you're going to base an entire movie around a singular conversation, that better be a damn interesting conversation. And it's just not one, in my opinion. I am glad to have at least seen it once, though. This does feel special in some kind of way that I can't explain. But once was enough. Kind of the same thing with this movie. It's super unique and simple, but really complex in its execution. I really liked how the setting was a character all on its own, and how the story unfolded over the runtime. At the same time, I can just never really see myself watching this again. I guess for some movies, one time is just enough for me. I did really enjoy this, but I think I'm just good.
We've been on the moon since the 50s. You want to know how we got there, right? I tell you. Anti-grav drive. Anti-gravity technology. We stole it from the Nazis after the end of World War II. It's perfectly obvious.
This movie is the definition of a mixed bag. If you're able to make it past the first 45 minutes, you'll find not only a pretty entertaining movie, but a fairly decent adaptation of this story. The latter hour and 40 minutes are well paced, well shot, and the characters are developed in believable and interesting ways. And the whole experience is very well acted. But the first 45 minutes are just an endurance, to some extent. It certainly has its moments, and I can appreciate what the director was going for, but a lot of it just doesn't pan out. In the same way that the novel is a critique of the era and its excess, this movie goes for more of an over-the-top caricature of the 1920s rather than something totally period accurate. That's awesome. That's a really cool way of interpreting this text. But it goes to a point where it's just kinda unbearable. And the movie doesn't seem to realize that that's the angle it's approaching it from. So it sort of makes the whole experience feel a little tone-deaf. But again, a lot of those problems come from the first 45 minutes. If you know the source material and you can get past that, you'll probably have a pretty alright time. God, this movie is tough to get through. In a good way. Guy is just such a likable and charismatic lead character, and he gets tossed around and abused so much. I mean, this movie does lull a little bit in the middle, but damn, the musical sequences and that ending just make the entire experience. I love Damien Chazelle, and even from this cheap black and white directorial debut, his storytelling skills are really put on display. And while it does linger a little in points, this was an hour and a half very well spent. This is M. Night Shyamalan's first film, and he reportedly hates it so much that he's tried to erase its existence entirely. And I really don't see why, because it's not all that bad. At moments it does feel a bit self-aggrandizing, but overall it comes off as very humble. Some of its ideas on growing up and spirituality are genuinely intriguing, and even though it can be pretty cheesy at times, this is just a classic coming-of-age story, and I quite enjoyed it. If you hadn't put it together already by perusing my channel, I really enjoy the work of M. Night Shyamalan. Sure, he's made a few bad pieces of shit, and sure, he's made a couple so bad they're good pieces of shit.
What? No.
But a few of his movies are sincerely sensational. His career hops around in quality so much that whenever a new movie of his comes out, I can't help but be extremely on edge when I go to see it. But sometimes it's alright to just be alright. And that's what this is. Old sure is alright. It's got a lot of things going for it, and a few things going against it. The dialogue is sometimes enthralling, and sometimes utterly horrendous. Half the dialogue is really simple and beautiful, or even really tense and totally fitting. But the other half of the dialogue is unnatural and uncomfortable, even hard to listen to at points. The cinematography is sometimes incredible, and sometimes completely disorienting. The music is entirely forgettable. The beginning is rough, the ending is kinda rough, but the stuff in between is pretty good. The idea and overall story is cool, which is probably mostly thanks to the source material, even if in execution it doesn't always stick to landing. But I can't deny that this movie does deliver at times. I'd say 4 out of 5 times you are feeling the desired effect that Shyamalan wants you to feel. The entire pregnancy scene and everything with the baby afterwards is legitimately jaw-dropping. It made my skin crawl in the best of ways. Or the parents' death scene, or the doctor monologuing to his dead mother, or basically every scene with Alex Wolff, in general, is pretty great. Sure, the whole thing kind of feels like a cheesy B-movie, but I can't really see this concept as anything but that. It was a fun time. Not anything fun enough for it to be anything more than good, but I enjoyed it, and I won't mind rewatching it sometime.
We're here for a reason.
This is a good movie. Maybe not as exceptional as I've been led to believe it was, but still good. Obviously, the non-theatrical cut is the only correct way of watching it, and it makes the experience a lot more impactful than it would have been otherwise, but I still find this just good. This movie was fun. It had some entertaining characters and some really enjoyable sequences. I appreciated that it showed off Harley Quinn and that she could actually hold her own on this team. From what I could gather from the first movie a few years back, the only reason Harley was on the team at all was for eye candy, I guess? She didn't really do anything before, so I'm glad that they actually gave her some more character here, even if she's still annoying as hell. Most of the dramatic moments felt a little forced, but it was at least well-paced, and most of the funny moments totally landed. Taika Waititi's inclusion was a nice surprise, Idris Elba was good as usual, the Rat Girl was enjoyable, everything with the polka dot man was f***ing wonderful, and pretty much all the action was well choreographed and well shot. All things considered, this will never be nearly as good as either of the Guardians movies. Hell, I'd consider this one of James Gunn's lesser movies overall, but it was still incredibly enjoyable, at least in the moment. This movie may be cheesy 90s garbage, but it has a nice amount of tender moments, and it's just a ton of fun. Sure, some of the effects haven't aged too gracefully, but I think this could be just as fun to a modern audience as it would be to its original intended audience. I've struggled for a long time in trying to think of an appropriate way that I could talk about this film, but I just don't think I can. It's honestly too cute and intimate for me to want to dissect. I really, really enjoyed this film, and I'm looking forward to seeing the next two. This was very innocent and cute. I know I won't be the first person to bring this up, but it feels stylistically very much like a Studio Ghibli movie, and we need more Pixar movies like that in my opinion. It's a simple slice-of-life type story that perfectly captures the imagination of childhood that I couldn't get enough of. It has a wonderful atmosphere, a really enjoyable 1950s-esque cartoony style, and a really pretty score, even if it's not all that memorable. I do think the ending wraps things up a little too concisely for my liking, but other than that, I think it's a really, really enjoyable experience overall. Also, I love Julia and her father. They may not be all too complex, but especially Julia is probably one of my favorite characters in all of Pixar's lineage now. If I were to rank it amongst Pixar's other movies, it'd probably go something like this. You may notice that the list may have shifted around a little since last time. We'll get to that momentarily. God, this movie's a lot of fun. It's off-kilter in all the right ways, and it's got a great soundtrack and memorable characters. This may feel a little off when compared to the rest of Wes Anderson's lineage, but I think it's totally worthy to be up there with some of his best. I love it. I hadn't seen this movie since I was probably 10 years old, and gosh darn, it is enjoyable. The rewriting of the original fairy tale is really well thought out and believable. Hell, the writing overall is well-rounded and put together in a totally watchable way. That goes for the music and the score as well. All the original songs and even many of the composed songs are memorable earworms that'll stick with you long after seeing the movie. All of the characters have great chemistry, and if we include the side characters, this is probably one of my favorite full casts of any animated Disney movie. Even the parents who only show up for a couple of scenes really leave an impact on you, and they stand out in their own way. The only thing that I'd consider not as good as it could be in this movie, and it may not be an objective problem for most, it may just be a personal thing, is the animation. The movements, the color, the art style, those are all fine, even if they're not too stylistically interesting. My issue lies with the glowiness of it all. Disney seemed to have this issue for a couple of years with their 3D animated movies, where everything has this really intense glow to it. In Wreck-It Ralph, it's kinda excusable since they're all video game characters, but in Tangled, it just feels distracting. It's a very minor nitpick, and you do get used to it after looking at it for long enough, but I figured it was worth bringing up. Regardless, in a very short time, this has probably become one of my favorite Disney movies, and I'm very glad to have watched it, and I look forward to seeing it again soon. Matt Johnson is easily one of my favorite filmmakers working today. He's a huge influence on me personally, and I've thoroughly enjoyed everything he's made. This film was the last thing of his that I had not seen, and it might just be my favorite. I don't want to say a whole lot about it because I think it's best to go in relatively blind and just enjoy the chaos. It's about a group of guys faking the moon landing in the 1960s. It's only about an hour and a half long, so it's super accessible, and I'll leave you with that. Go have fun. The editing in this movie is sensational, and the first time I saw that ending, I had to pick my jaw up off the ground. This is one of my favorite and easily the most creative found footage movie I have ever seen, and I will happily be watching this again in the very near future. Yeah, this is why the Pixar ranking is a little different than it was last time. In preparation for Monsters at Work, I rewatched Monsters University and Monsters, Inc., the latter for the first time in probably about 15 years. I've always thought this movie was fine, but no, this movie's f***ing great. Maybe the best aspect of this movie is just how casual it all is. It just drops you into this unique world and lets you put the pieces together as you go. The exposition is excellent, and it never feels in your face. Mike and Sully are simply two of the best leads in all of animation history, and the emotional beats with Boo are all executed just right. On top of that, the second act breakup feels totally natural and actually hits the audience in the way it's supposed to. It's well paced, every character is enjoyable, unique, and memorable, the music is fantastic, the twist is executed perfectly, and at least in my opinion, the animation still looks pretty good and serves to make the monsters not too cute and cuddly, just the right amount of upsetting, but still empathetic. I couldn't tell you what I didn't see in this movie for so long, because looking at it now, it's impossible to see it as anything but one of Pixar's absolute best. If for whatever reason you haven't seen this movie already, see it. I think I still enjoy University just a little bit more, but the two are almost interchangeable at this point. I mean, for God's sakes, the end credit scene alone is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Seek this movie out. Okay, yeah, the longer it sits with me, the better it gets. I don't want to offer any criticism on this, because I feel like anything I'd have to say would just be petty. Man. And yet, we still have one to go. I don't think my favorite film of the past 5 months is perfect, especially when matched up against Lost in Translation. But I fell in love with this movie, and I have a lot to say about it, so... I was extremely skeptical going into this movie. I'd followed its production from a distance for a couple of years, and I had no idea what to think. Sure, it was being written and directed by members of the creative team behind Gravity Falls, and it was being produced by my favorite creative duo currently working in the film industry. But the behind-the-scenes stuff in the teaser trailer looked kinda awful. At first it was advertised as just another overt technology bad movie, but for kids. But as the release date drew closer and we started to learn more about it, I became cautiously optimistic. All that to say, I ended up watching it 5 times in the first 2 or 3 weeks of its release, so it ended up being really good. As I said before I started this segment, I have a lot to say about this, so strap yourselves in. Do I think this is better than the Lego Movie or Into the Spider-Verse? No. But is it up there? Yeah, I'd say it is. It's weird because the concept of this movie should not work. The first 20 to 30 minutes of its runtime suggests it's going to be something like a Goofy movie. A father and kid have to reconnect by going on a wacky road trip together. And yeah, that happens. But half an hour in, it also shifts into a totally different apocalyptic survival movie? And this isn't just one of those technology bad movies. At first, that's what it seems like it's trying to say, but it transforms it into so much more than that. It's crazy and threw me for a loop the first time I saw it, but tonally, it totally works. Lord and Miller have proved in their body of work that they're very good at pacing, and that definitely applies with this movie. None of the scenes feel too long or too short. The funny moments, though abundant and sometimes out of place may they be, perfectly balance out the emotional moments. And speaking of the emotional moments, my god are they well executed! Another thing Lord and Miller have proved, like James Gunn, is that they're really good at creating fun, entertaining adventures with really emotional, totally in-place endings that really bookend the adventure well. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs started it, the Lego Movie perfected it, and since then they've constantly maintained that level of quality while changing it up enough to make sure it never gets stale. The Mitchells vs. the Machines first hits you with that cliché emotional ending you've come to expect, undercuts the whole thing with a joke and an entertaining action sequence, then gives you a real ending that ties up all the loose ends in an emotionally satisfying way that the cliché one never would have been able to achieve. To continue on the emotional moments for a second, this movie was more emotionally resonant in the first 10 minutes than I thought it would be for the entirety of the runtime. Not only are the scenes well written, but each beat brought up in the beginning is brilliantly reincorporated later. The main emotional through line with the father and the daughter specifically is f***ing genius, and it made me tear up at a couple points. A lot of the emotional moments would be so much less though, if it wasn't for the sensational soundtrack. This is something I have to gush about for a minute because not only is it something I haven't seen anyone else bring up, but not only is the score diverse, but there was so much thought put into the smallest of things. My favorite track in the film is easily Home Movies. It captures the emotional core of the film in this haunting and delicate melody that shows just how fragile the father and daughter's relationship is. And the way in which it's utilized in the film is so clever. At one point in the song, an electric organ kicks in. Its low hum invites a feeling of nostalgia, like the hum of an old CRT television, which just so happens to coincide with Papa Mitchell setting up his old family video camera and reliving long-lost memories. The eventual reincorporation of this song, too, lets us experience the same scene from the daughter's point of view, and it puts the music in a new context that hits just as hard, if not harder. Obviously, the animation is beautifully stylized. I mean, I've almost come to expect that from Sony at this point. The only bone I could have to pick with this movie is its comedy. This movie is a riot, there's no arguing that. It's one of the funniest movies I've seen in a good long while. But I'd say 1 in every 30 of its jokes fall flat, and they fall flat hard. Most of those jokes revolve around internet humor, so I'm not really sure how well this film will age, but apart from those few rocky jokes, this movie is something special. It captures a really specific energy that I just ate up. It's no Wolfwalkers, but I'd rank it very highly amongst the best animated movies I've seen throughout the duration of this series. I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. Per the usual, I saw a few things other than movies over the past few months, so let's quickly go over those. Bill Hader is easily one of my favorite SNL alums ever. I've wanted to watch this show since it was first announced, but I'd never had HBO until recently. I started it with a buddy of mine who absolutely loves it, and goddamn, for good reason. I've made it through season 1, and I can tell you already that this will probably end up being one of my favorite shows. Soho Hank would be enough to make this show enjoyable on its own, but Hader proves himself to not only have a great range with his acting, but he's also a great writer and a talented director. This show has great setups and payoffs, and it's all super well timed because of its pacing. It's both a hilarious comedy and a drama with really uncomfortable moments that toes the line seamlessly and wraps itself into half-hour episodes just perfectly. It's digestible, it's entertaining, it'll tear at your heartstrings way more than you'd expect. It's some of the best television I've seen in a long time, and I can't wait to start season 2. As good as this miniseries is, I don't really get how it was the highest rated thing on IMDb at one point. It's great, no doubt, and it's astonishing to see these events play out in the order they're presented, and to see them in as grisly detail as they are presented. But to say that this is a little overhyped would be an understatement. Still, great acting, great effects, great writing, great music, great cinematography, it's still definitely worth watching. I also had no time to watch anything Halloween related this year, but this was definitely the scariest thing I watched in the past 6 months, so this is the excuse I'm using to show off my low-effort Halloween costume. Just disregard that this whole episode is probably coming out like a week before Thanksgiving. Thank you.
This is Dave.
Dave Chappelle's final special for Netflix, while maybe not his funniest, is perhaps his most poignant. For a long time, I've held the position that, aside from Norm Macdonald, Dave Chappelle is the GOAT of stand-up comedy because he uses his platform not only to say great jokes, but to connect with his audience and make them question things. He's a 21st century philosopher who paints inquisitive pictures with his words that touch on timeless issues that will resonate forever. If you've never seen any of his specials before, I'd say hold off on this one for a while. I think you need a bit more context of his career to understand just how spectacular this one is. But for God's sakes, man, I mean, if you're not already on the Chappelle hype train, I mean, it's never too late to hop on. Please check out his work.
Carry on, Dave.
A good friend of mine has been trying to get me more into anime recently. I've also started learning the Japanese language and will continue to study it for the next couple of years, so I figure it's only appropriate to consume a bit more Japanese media. I don't know, I can get into anime movies because they're a singular experience, but I've never really been able to get into anime series because of what a time commitment they can be. But Death Note? Well, I like Death Note. I'm only a few episodes in, but wow, I did not expect it to get as complicated and sociopathic and sadistic as it would be so fast. And I assume it's only going to get crazier from here on out, and I am here for it. I love Ryuk. His character alone makes the entire show worth watching, and the main idea is fun and can be extended in a lot of wild ways. So I look forward to seeing where this goes. The Up universe lends itself perfectly to this style of very short TV series. All of the characters don't feel like bastardizations of the ones from the original movie. The animation updates the original in just the right way. Like, damn, it's legitimately gorgeous. And each of the stories, though predictable, don't overstay their welcome and are just so wholesome that I don't really care. Pixar, if you're gonna keep going down this animated TV show road, use Doug Days as a model. It's balanced just right, and it's a very worthy addition to your animated catalog. This show is really good, but I don't think it's as good as most people say it is. I think once the entire show is done, we'll look back at it as a really great overall experience that is better than the vast sum of its parts, sort of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think the payoff of sticking with this show will be astounding. But it's going to be rocky getting through it from time to time. The main story with Omni-Man and Mark is fantastic, and there are undeniably interesting subplots set up here. But that's all this season feels like, set up for later seasons. There's more emphasis put on setting up stories we don't know or care about yet than a lot of what's actually happening in the moment. The animation also kinda sucks. Not the art style, mind you, the animation itself. It seems like they pumped most of their budget into a few of the action scenes without putting much care or attention onto the everyday conversations that take up most of the show. But the dialogue and voice acting are fantastic, a lot of the surprising moments totally hit their mark, and I really like all of these characters. I still did enjoy this show, don't get me wrong, but I certainly think it's going to get a whole lot better from here on out.
I'd been waiting for this for a long time. I've been a devout fan of Nathan Barnatt's work for 8, maybe 9 years now. His brand of comedy and his style of filmmaking has been a huge inspiration on me, especially throughout my formative movie years in middle and high school. His new short film, Milford, was announced 3 years ago, and I'd been following its production in the background since its first teaser. With it now finally being widely released, I have conflicting feelings on it, and I'm so happy I do. Right off the bat, the cinematography is beautiful, and the soundtrack is incredible. It sets a mood so oppressive and deadbeat, but with sparks of hopefulness. It captures the short film's themes perfectly. This has the antithesis of a satisfactory ending. I was upset with it when I first saw it, but the film as a whole is saying something more profound that I've yet to figure out. There's obviously some larger point being made about the nature of the American dream and the effects of capitalism on small towns, but I still haven't nailed down what that is yet. The ending can be interpreted in so many different ways when contextualizing the rest of the short, I'm honestly left sorta baffled. I like Nathan exploring this more serious side of his filmmaking toolset, and I'm looking forward to him hopefully doing more work like this in the future, even if it takes a few more years of waiting. Nathan, keep up the good work, man. I hope you're staying strong.
I'm only about halfway through season 1 of this show, so I'm not entirely sure where this show is going yet, but if you can make it through the sort of awful pilot episode, you're in for something special here. So as I said earlier, I rewatched the Monsters movies so I could prepare myself for this show, and what I came to realize from rewatching them is that I really love this world. It's a lot of fun to see the similarities and differences between our world and theirs, and if this show does anything well, it at least shows us more of this world and how it works. Some may complain that they reuse character models too much in this show, like with the character Gary, but that's actually something I'm totally fine with. I always thought it was funny how in Monsters U, all of our main characters have memorable, unique designs, and all of the other monsters share varieties of like the same 20 character models. That led me to assume that I guess only some individuals in this world were built different. But no, this show kind of proves that there is a limit to what a monster can and can't be, and that monster genetics are something that is trackable in this universe. That may be a really stupid and specific detail to compliment this show on, but if I'm being honest, it's one of the only things I can give it. What can I say? The first 2 or 3 episodes are fine, and the last episode is fine, but everything in between just reeks of missed potential. Some of the character relationships are enjoyable, but most of them I just find annoying. And I like Tyler as a character, they just do nothing interesting with him. The music makes me uncomfortable, the story is entirely forgettable, the animation is uncanny and sucks ass. Like, Monsters University is the perfect evolution of Incorporated in terms of its art style. It hits a sweet spot that captures this world just right. Monsters at Work pushes it too far, and it just makes everything look ugly. The main problem with this show is that it's shifted audiences from the original movies. Sure, the movies may have been made for a target audience of kids, but both are so smartly written that they can be enjoyed and appreciated by any age group. And that is unfortunately not the case with Monsters at Work. You could put this in front of a small child and they'd enjoy it fine, but even then I don't think it would stick with them nearly as much as either of the films. I get the feeling that this may be an unpopular opinion for some, but sad to say, you will not gain anything from watching this show. But that's just me. Maybe I just don't get anime. I mean, this is fun, but is this how it all is? All of the conventions of anime that I've always heard people make fun of are present here, but they're so over the top that I can't tell if I'm supposed to be taking this seriously or if it's meant to be done like a parody. If it's meant to be like a parody, then maybe this just wasn't the right anime for me to start on. But if it's not, I don't know how much of this I can take. That's not to say I hate this show. I don't. Maybe I'm just not far enough into it to fully get or appreciate it. But at the very least, I am conflicted. On a separate note, I also watched a few documentaries, both on streaming services and on YouTube, that I'd like to highlight really fast. First off, Lemmy Know's newest video on Jack the Ripper. Lemmy Know produces some of the highest quality content on this website. Like, legitimately, a lot of his content is better than many syndicated documentaries, and all of his stuff is available for free. His most recent video, a comprehensive hour-long analysis of Jack the Ripper, is absolutely astounding, and some of his best work. I highly recommend it. Jiro and his son's life stories are understated and admirable, but the whole documentary also has this air of tragedy to it. It's unshakable. It's interesting. This documentary may be slow, but it's insightful and beautiful in the best of ways. Well, this is depressing as hell, but it's well put together. It really understands pacing and how to use music to get emotional responses. It's an interesting watch. The sequel, however, was mostly a waste of time. While Missing 411 felt like a personal and artistic look into these sensitive cases, The Hunted felt like a team of executives saw the first one and said, "Yeah, do more of that," while totally missing the point of what made the first one special. Missing 411 feels like something you'd see on Hulu. The Hunted feels like something you'd see on cable at 2 a.m. The first one had moments that legitimately left me floored, but the second one just felt sterile more than anything. Even though it had twice the budget of the first, it feels like it was made by a corporate team and not a filmmaker. The content itself is interesting, it's just portrayed in a completely uninteresting fashion. And if I'm to believe popular reviews of these two documentaries, I get that this is an unpopular opinion, but that's just how I see it. Solar Sands is one of my favorite creators on YouTube, and his hour-and-a-half-long million subscriber special is undoubtedly one of his best videos he's made to date. He has an analytical style that anyone can enjoy, and he's a bit of an idol of mine when it comes to video editing. I can't recommend his catalog enough, and I can't wait to see what he'll do next. Now, this last one doesn't fall under any of the parameters I set up for this series, but it's a whole heap of fun, and I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't at least mention it. The Sonic 06 real-time fan dub by Snapcube has quickly become one of my favorite things ever. Sure, it may have a couple of dull moments, but the fact that it is so consistently, genuinely hilarious when it's all improvised, more or less, on the spot, is unbelievably impressive, and I can't get enough of it. If you're pretty internet savvy, or even if you're just a millennial or a Gen Zer, you're going to have fun with this. It's 2 tons of fun, and I can't recommend it enough.
Oh my god! Someone help me!
Oh my god! That looked like it hurt.
And that's all for now. Or maybe for good. That's where you guys come in. As I said at the beginning of this video, it has been a strenuous few months. I lost my grandpa. I lost my childhood dog. Nearly every day over the summer, I was devoted to a job where I was busy for 11 to 12 hours a day. Our finances are in question. My family life has been down and maybe up again. And the past month of moving to a new campus and everything involving the transition has been one of the most stressful and inconsistent 30 to, well, I guess now 2 months, 30 to 60 days I've ever experienced in my life. On top of that, I am no longer a film student. I've already graduated for that. For the next 2 years, I'm at the University of Wyoming for English and creative writing. Simply put, I don't know if I have the time or drive to continue making this series that not a lot of people watch in the first place. For the past year, most of the videos I've uploaded on this channel have either just been school projects or installments of this series, and I'm not particularly enjoying it anymore. I really love doing these short movie reviews, I really do, but there's a lot of effort that goes into them, and when that's all that I'm making, I just really don't see a point to it all. For whatever reason, my Signs video essay from a year or two ago has been getting a big spike in views, at least for my channel. I really enjoy making that style of video. I love analyzing stuff like that, and I've tried to incorporate little bits and pieces in this series with video analysis. Like, I really like my review of Ferris Bueller's Day Off from the last episode, because it dips into that analysis that I want to go into more. I'd like to pursue doing more long-form standalone stuff, like some video essays or more episodes of my favorite artists, just not as long as the pilot episode. I do still plan on making one video in this series sometime in the next 6 months, crossing my fingers, and you'll see that hopefully sooner rather than later. I think I'm alright with just calling this series closed. Unless, of course, you all want me to continue it. Or maybe I could start a Letterboxd, and you can follow me on there if you want more up-to-date micro reviews. I've also seen a few comments asking me to update my top 50 movies list, since it's definitely changed a lot in the past couple years since before I started film school. The thing is, I still have a list of 100 or so movies that I'd really love to see before I ever update that list. So, that video is still a while off. It'll come eventually, just not for a while. But again, I want to hear from you all. What kind of stuff do you want me to pursue? While I'm fairly sure I'd like to end this series right here, I'd still like to hear your input. I would say that stopping this series would slow my overall channel output, but if you've stuck with me this long, you know that that's probably not the case. But yeah, thank you all for sticking with me. It really does mean a lot. Has been rough lately, so I really do appreciate you being here. I know that I have changed a lot over the past couple of years. If this series is good for anything, I guess it's cool that it can kind of show that. But yeah, I'll see you guys again, hopefully soon, with something new. And I think we'll call it quits there.
Fantastic. Do you think that captures what we're all about?
Happy 2 years.
Perfectly Kidsborough.